Sahana vavatu, Sahano bhunaktu, Sahaviryang karavavahe, Tejasvina vadhitamastu, Ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Chapter 12 is highlighting the need to understand our interconnectedness with the world. Because this principle of interconnectedness is the prerequisite for a healthy, integrated person, which we call a Jnani. And this Jnani is being spoken in verse 13 to 19. Now the question is, what does interconnectedness mean? Because this is a very important principle to understand. It means that you, as a person, are an essential link in this grand scheme of things. This means you're not outside the system. And this system that I'm speaking of is called Ishwara's grand order. So, if we understand this, what is the effects? What kind of life do we then live by, understanding this, that the fact that I'm interconnected with this order and I'm never outside the system? Because we often say, right, oh, I'm outside the system and I can get away from the system and I can be separate from the system, I can detach from the system. So we always kind of push the system away as if I'm an independent entity, separate or non-dependent on the system, where in actual fact, we are completely dependent on the system to do anything. To think, you need the brain cells to work. To talk, you need air flowing through your vocal cords. So there are 4 effects if we understand our interconnectedness. The first is you don't fight the system. Most of our time gets spent in fighting the system, rejecting the system, criticizing the system. So from the standpoint, what does it mean not to fight the system? From the standpoint of swadharma, that is your personal duty, what does this mean? It means your focus is on what you can do right now, because you're part of the system. That means you're never outside the system. So this means our only power is what can I actually do within this system? That is, where do my talents, where do my skills lie? So let me apply thus those skills and talents wherever appropriate. Therefore, instead of focusing on our helplessness, our stuckness, our powerlessness, that is what I can't do, where I do not shine, we instead focus on those places where specifically where you do shine on the basis of your talents, your skills, and your strengths. So this means you have a unique role to play. Everyone does. And this involves, as I said last week, number 1, you need to know that the script changes. So this means swadharma, in order to be part of this system, to contribute fully, I need to be flexible. Thus, I need to allow the script to change according to the environment which is being presented to me all the time. So there's no question of being rigid or being sort of stubborn, like, no, I like to be in the old way. I don't want to move forward. I'm comfortable in my comfort zone. No, because even though it is comfortable, this does not produce growth. The second is, we need to learn how to negotiate conflicts between roles. All life long, especially if we're dealing with people, we will indeed encounter conflicts. This means you have one vision of how things are supposed to be according to your genuine understanding, but another person equally educated may have another vision. Now you need to understand, how do we fit these 2 visions in a coherent manner so that we can actually move forward instead of just complaining whose system is better. And the third is we need to avoid spillovers. What does this mean? It means that if I'm doing a role in one area and I do not get a chance to express myself fully in that role, then what do? Then we come home or we go to someone else and then we just lash out onto that other person who doesn't deserve. Because what does this mean? We need to address whatever happens in whatever role we happen to be in. So this means we cannot now go around and just start spilling all these things, because then you have no sense of what belongs where. Now, again, we are on the part of do not fight the system. And I spoke about from the standpoint of swadharma. Now, what does it mean to say not fight the system from the standpoint of Samanya Dharma? Samanya Dharma in Sanskrit, Samanya just means universal. That means applicable to all. It means subserving one's likes and dislikes to universal orders. Now, this word subserving means, obviously, a person may interpret this as in, oh, okay, so no, this is about should. I should subserve and I shouldn't subserve. This word subserving has nothing to do with what you should and shouldn't. In fact, our Vedic scriptures do not tell you what to do. We simply point out the facts, and then it is up to you to see how aligning with those facts is actually producing a successful, meaningful life. So instead of understanding this subserve, as in I should subserve according to Dharma and put my likes and dislikes away, instead of doing that, we understand if I go with my likes, that is my raga, then sure, I will get what I want. However, there is a cost. And that cost is either seen or unseen. What's the seen cost? First of all, there may be conflict within you. Second, what if I'm found out? Third, it produces low self-esteem because the person knows I cannot do what I know inherently to be right. I do not have the power, the sensibility to follow that inner voice of Samanya Dharma that is saying this is the right way, and I don't have the strength to do that. So that produces low self-confidence. So over time, what happens is the person, by consistently listening to their voice of their personal likes and dislikes over Samanya Dharma, is they end up stop trusting life because they cannot trust themselves. They cannot follow their own voice. So then how are they supposed to follow the voice of life? So what that happens then is the person starts to see everyone as a crook, doesn't trust anyone. And then what happens? Now no one can come and help because everyone's a crook, right? I cannot trust myself, therefore I can't trust you. Therefore, I do not want to listen to you. In other words, it ends up in a downward spiral. All because of what? Because the person chooses to follow their likes and dislikes over the voice of Dharma. So again, we're not saying now go and subserve. We're just pointing out what is the cost. Now it is up to you whether you want to follow or not. There are also unseen effects. This means in the future, at some point, at some time, something may happen that is going to be unpleasant as a result of not following the ways of universal ethics. Now, also what happens is we have cultural norms. Every country has a certain culture, and we often mistake these cultural norms for universal ethics. What happens is if you mistake, for example, I know that, you know, in America, right, or even Australia, what do teenagers do? They're sort of like dating, right? They're dating boys and, you know, it's like, and then an Indian comes over from India. It's like, how could you do this, right? This is, you people have no values here, right? You know, this is inappropriate. So this is what it means to mistake the cultural values for universal ethics. So we need to understand what is here universal ethics and what is here cultural values. So this means every country has its own culture. And we do not understand what universal ethics are, then we're going to start looking down on the country as if they don't have ethics and we do. So this is another error that gets produced if one's ignorant to these universal ethics. You also have free will to defy these cultural norms, because in most cases, these cultural norms as they are called, are sometimes inefficient, but in most cases, or sometimes they're adharmic. So this means you have the free will to also defy them. I know that in one culture in Bulgaria, I'm not going to call out the name, there is a little community, and the woman gets sold, their daughters get sold off to the men. I think the man pays $10,000 to buy the daughter, and they're not allowed to date. They're, you know, if the guy wants to speak to the girl, he has to set up a conversation with the parents, and then the parents will say, okay, well, we like you and you can marry our daughter. So the daughter can only marry the boy who the parents select. So this is one of these cultural norms. Now there's also, this was actually a documentary, there was one girl who she said, she was, being recorded, and she was, what do you think about this? And she said, this is absolute nonsense, because we don't have the right to choose who we love. Our parents may pick the boys that we may not feel attracted to, but they think is good for us. And she just totally rebelled out of the cultural norms. And she was sort of in a little bit of an outsider. So there is some price to pay, but she's still following her inner voice of resisting what she believes to be a little bit restrictive. Okay. Now, the second, what else does it mean to have this vision of interconnectedness, that I'm interconnected? It means I want to investigate the system. Now, acknowledging my interconnectedness, I now want to investigate the system, meaning I am more likely to turn each day into an opportunity to align further with the order. Because if you want to investigate something, if you're aligned with it, it means now you want to get along better with it. And how do you do that? By investigating the ins and outs of it, nuts and bolts of it. So this means one has to realize everyone is born with 3 capacities. So this means there's no human being who does not have these 3 capacities. This means we're all endowed with Icha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Jnana Shakti. The capacity to desire. Everyone has the capacity to desire. The capacity to do, and the capacity to know. Does anyone not have these 3 capacities? No one. The only matter is how we use them. We can use our capacity to desire, for example, some substances, drugs or something, or some knowledge that is not quite validated. You can then have the capacity to know that, and you also have the capacity to exercise that. So this means it is only a matter of putting these 3 capacities in the right place. Now, by investigating or aligning ourselves with these 3 capacities, what happens is you become an active participant. So this means this is not about being an outsider or putting oneself outside of the system, but rather asking, how can I be an active participant? Because this is where the person shines. How is a person going to be happy if they're suppressing their own talents and just keeping them in the name of, oh, I don't want to get involved with the world? No way. So the question is, what is participation not? For example, what is it not in reference to COVID? In the last 1 year, COVID has come. What happened? A lot of people participated, had their own opinions. But how do we participate? There was intellectual criticism. There was criticizing the government. There was spreading conspiracy theories, criticizing the system. And it all seems like the person is actually participating. Is that really participation? No, that is just doing the same thing that everyone else is doing. You're not really helping the system. The person is just adding more pressure onto the system. So therefore, this is not what participation is, because the easiest thing in the world is just to criticize the world. This is not good. The government is not doing a good job. They are there to get us, right? So these are the easiest things. This is what most people choose to do. This is not participation. It's literally wasting away Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti, and Icha Shakti. Wasting it away for the sake of just sort of spreading these comments on YouTube, on Facebook, and then just being in this little community, feeling like, we're there to get the government, we're there to expose the government. It's nothing. It just comes and goes. It's just keeping oneself busy because there's nothing else to spend their time on. Okay. The question now is, what is participation? It is finding solutions in your own sphere of influence. So everyone has their little circle of influence, everyone. That influence may not be big, or it may be a little bit larger, it may be smaller. Either way, we find what is our sphere of influence. And then we put our time, energy, and effort in that particular sphere. Therefore, what are we doing? We're converting criticism into problem-solving mode. We become a problem solver. And what does this do? That alone unleashes your creativity. So this is not about necessarily succeeding in figuring out how to solve a problem, but just the mere act of involving yourself in being a problem solver. What does that do? It makes your mind think. It makes you expand your thinking. And that alone then creates all these new connections in reference to everything else in your life. So this is not a matter of succeeding in life or failing in life. Just getting into it and being an active participant alone is what produces the person to be to exercise their creativity. Because we often say, well, why should I get involved, and I'm not really good. Now think about it this way. If we all think I'm not really good, are we ever going to get motivated to do anything in the first place? No. But why is a person good in the first place? Because they got into the subject matter in the first hand. So this means all one has to do is just get started, and then the rest will take care of itself. That's all you have to do. Like, I don't know what to do. Well, just do something, because there's always something to do. That's the point. Okay. The third effect is knowing now that our presence is interconnected with this world. Now there's no more need to fix the world. Why? Because the world is already intelligently put and sustained together. The world has existed without you. Before you were born, it was running just fine. There were no problems. And the world will continue running even after the body departs. And yet here we are born, and suddenly we give ourselves this huge task like, no, I'm here to save the world, the world needs me. Well, here's a little message. The ahamkara may not like to hear it. The world doesn't need you. The ahamkara is like, how dare you say that? My whole existence here is on the basis of me being needed. No, the world doesn't need you. The world runs just fine. So what does this mean? It means we only need to put our presence and align ourselves with this grand order and contribute according to our swadharma. Beyond that, there's no further control. Because what can a small individual do other than give the little bit that they can give? Now, if you think about it, this is actually a huge relief to understand. It's that the world doesn't need your help. Because our whole life is invested in the fact that I'm needed and I need to be here, and the world can't be without me, my family can't be without me. Now, if you just understand that is actually not true, right? If you were to go tomorrow, the world continued just fine. Look at Steve Jobs. How many people did he influence? He goes, the world continues making iPhones, right? Continues using the cell phones. So in other words, it's a great relief just to see this world objectively and see your presence objectively, instead of putting these imaginary notions as though, I made this huge difference. That is not your job to think how much of a difference you're making. You're making a difference directly or indirectly. Our only duty is to influence, be participating in our little sphere of influence. What effects happen on the basis of that is beyond your control. And fourth is knowing our interconnectedness within this world. It means there is no possibility of detachment. Now, what do we talk about? What do we usually preach? Detach yourself from the world. So first of all, this means, why can you not be detached? Because you are part of the interconnected whole. In other words, all that is here is Ishvara manifesting as these orders. So where's the question of separating or detaching myself from the very orders which allow me to think about detaching? Because even to think I want to detach, how much activity is going on in the brain just to say that? That is all Ishvara's orders. So there's no question of ever detaching from anything. And detachment is one of the common notions that is said to be taught in the Bhagavad Gita. How is it interpreted? One of them is, I don't want to be involved, right? A sense of non-participating, non-involvement. The other is sort of like, as someone said, being a little bit cautious about, I think Robert said it, not being entirely dependent on these binding desires, because knowing that they're just, they're binding and they're holding me down, they're preventing me from moving forward, looking at different opportunities, therefore don't get attached to them. Now, I want to talk about specifically why you cannot detach yourself from the world. Let's look at it physically. Like suppose I want to detach myself from the world physically. I want to go to the Himalaya, or, I want to be alone and so on, or at least the way the person thinks. First of all, you're constantly drawing from the world. You're drawing air, you're drawing food, you're drawing resources, you're drawing even the chair you're sitting on now. Because officially, if you want to say you want to detach yourself physically, then you shouldn't even be wearing clothes right now, because that's also physical, right? It's also part of the world. In other words, the world is entirely that principle which makes you sustain your physical survival. So there's no question of physical detachment. Let's look at it emotionally. The incorrect way to understand detachment emotionally is to say you need to be in this stable, neutral mode. We often call this equanimity, just stable and neutral. Now, suppose a kid goes up to your lap and they want to cuddle, and you're being this stable, neutral father, right? It's like, okay, the kids are there, and then you don't show any emotion. You say, kids, I'm just a stable, neutral person because I read the Gita and they said you must exercise equanimity. What kind of kids are you going to create in 20 years? Imagine your own parents, right? You want to just get some love from them. And they, and then your father says, and your mom says, no, son, we're reading the Gita, you should just not put too much emotion into anything because it all comes and goes. So just don't get too involved. Just kind of, yeah, okay, you're here, but it's all gonna come and go. So that wouldn't help you at all. So this is not the right way to understand detachment in reference to emotions. The correct way to understand is just simply having mindfulness, that means alertness, without judging the situation. So if your kids are sitting there by your lap, you're being mindful what's going on, and you're not judging, you're not adding more onto what it is. You're not saying, oh, this is what life is about. I'm so lucky to have kids in my lap now, right? And neither are you saying, oh, this is just a waste of time and this is all going to come and go. In other words, you just enjoy whatever is present, but you're neither attaching more onto it, and neither are you taking away what shouldn't be taken away. In other words, you're just simply, you're not getting entangled with whatever's going on. I'm not getting entangled. Why? Because I'm looking at it mindfully. I'm not judging it. In other words, the person is being objective. Now let's ask this question. What is entanglement in reference to loving a person? Because this is where most of the entanglements happen. The common situation happens is when the more I love someone else, a person, the more I want them to do what? The more I want them to be exactly to match my internal fancies, to match the fancies of how they should be according to my fancies. And then what happens? It leads to manipulation. Because, hey, I want them to be according to my fancies, so then I'm going to manipulate to make sure that that happens according to how I want it to be, because it's going to make me happy. So then what happens? Then love becomes the source of entanglement. It becomes the source of suffering. And then what happens? Then we make a conclusion, because in order to interpret whatever's happening, that's how the mind goes, right? It makes now interpretation. What does it say? Okay, so we say, since love is causing me suffering, then let me get detached. Let me not get entangled in love, because love is causing me suffering. This is how we use our minds to geniusly connect two things that have no connection whatsoever. And yet to us, it is as though completely true. So how to understand this properly? Don't get rid of love. Rather, investigate that the tendency to control is that which is causing suffering. But instead, we will look at what? Love as the cause. No, there is always something else that has been neglected. In this case, the need to manipulate, the need to make the other act according to how I wish them to be, so that I may feel more secure, so that I may feel closer to them. So this means that needs to be looked at instead of love. And then we sort of break up, we say, oh, love, I don't want to be in a relationship because love is the cause of all trouble. So this means the person hasn't reflected fully into what is actually going on. Okay, let's summarize. By recognizing our interconnectedness, what happens? We become a focused contributor. Where is my area of influence? And thus we put our time, energy, and effort into that specific sphere of influence. We don't become a detached being. You understand the importance of this? This is not about becoming detached, because if you are focusing within your sphere of influence, why would you want to get detached? Because there's utter joy being involved in wherever areas you shine. Therefore, the priority becomes, what can I do for others? Instead of what others should do for me. And how do we come to this place? What can I do for others? By finding your sphere of influence and then putting your energy, time, and effort there specifically. Let's move on. I want to do revision of the verses. And before revising the verses, there was a question that was posed last week. And the question was pertaining to concentration. We were speaking about Upasana Yoga, level 1. And Mina asked, can this concentration also be in reference to, puzzles and reading books, and can we use kind of like these worldly things to extend our concentration? And I said yes. Now, I want to expand upon this because it may produce some confusion. There are two types of concentration. There is concentration, which involves being really alert to whatever you happen to be doing in the world. That means using your cognitive capacity in order to get things done well. This means this kind of concentration involves your intellect that is discriminating worldly events, worldly situations, relationships, your own feelings, your own thoughts, your own memories. And there's the other kind of concentration. And this is what Upasana Yoga level 1 is specifically made for. And that concentration is that inner voice of the silence of yourself, the silence of my own self, without the stimulation of the external inputs, without the stimulation of reading puzzles and doing these crossword games and kind of exercising your intellect by programming and so on. So this means there is indeed a difference. One of them is for the world. The other is just being with yourself without being distracted by these thoughts. Okay, does this make sense now? Because I don't think I answered it last time fully. It kind of like sounded like, no, just let go Upasana Yoga level 1, you don't need it. This means Upasana Yoga level 1 is specifically for putting concentration upon yourself. We just call it Atma, the self. Being with yourself without kind of needing the stimulation of the world in order to keep you focused.
Could you say that it's the concentration on the object and concentration on the subject? Would that be another way of saying that?
Yeah, it's beautiful the way Martin put it. So this is Upasana Yoga level 1 is about focusing on the subject, the very presence that is always here. Whereas focusing on the objects, you require, these puzzles, these games, and so on. You require their existence. But who's always present? You are. However, even though we're always present to ourselves, we still haven't learned to be at peace with ourselves. We haven't learned to sort of just be at one with ourselves. So Upasana Yoga level 1 is specifically for getting to know the subject, being comfortable with the very subject who's always present. Now, verse 13 to 19 expounds the characteristics of a wise person. A wise person in Sanskrit we call Jivanmukta, Jnani, Sthita Prajna, or Para Bhakti. These are all different names that are used. And Krishna says that a Jnani is dearest to me. When he says dearest, what he actually means closest to me. Why? Because there's no distance between a Jnani and Ishvara. For example, just to give you some context, what do lovers often say? We are very close. Very familiar with this, right? You are. We're close. And in fact, the more you spend time with your partner, sometimes you don't feel so close, but sometimes you feel very close. Now, what does this mean to say, I feel close with them?
Because in thoughts and in actions and physically and mentally, psychologically, we're close to the person. Okay. We're thinking about the person all the time. We feel for the person all the time.
Good. So there is a high amount of love. There's a high amount of devotion between the two of you. And thus, on the basis of that, you say, we feel close. Therefore, when devotion or love increases, then the distance between the devotee and the devoted decreases. In other words, smaller the distance, greater the love. The closer I feel to them, the more I love them, the more I am devoted to them. Whereas no distance, what does that mean? Infinite love. So my question now is, can you have no distance between two people? Two limited individuals?
No.
No. Okay. But what do two individuals want? They want to be close, right? They want like, oh, I don't feel close enough. I want to be closer. Often what happens is in therapy sessions, right, or counseling sessions, one of the woman or the man says, you know, I just don't feel they're close to me. I want them to feel closer. One of the others says that. Now, how can you have two limited beings? How are you going to have them come closer? What do you mean? Are you going to like merge the bodies? Are you going to merge the minds? If you were to merge the minds, then you wouldn't know who you were, right? You wouldn't know who's the one that's close now. Are you close to me? Am I close to you? How are you going to merge two minds together? You would lose your identity. So there's no question of two individuals merging together. And yet, most of the psychology deals with this principle of, I want to be closer. And so this is where Vedanta takes over, where psychology stops. So this means you can go to a counselor and say, you know, we want to be close together. What is the psychologist going to say? Well, let's look at your childhood issues. Maybe there's some influence. Now, it's true, right? There is some contributing factors. They're keeping the person apart. But is that the only? No. So what does now Vedanta take over? It says, no matter what you find, even if you were to fix it, you still won't feel close. Because the only person that you can feel close to is yourself. You cannot feel ever close with someone else because two limited beings cannot experience limitless closeness, because zero distance means what? Limitless. Infinity. Therefore, no distance is only possible between self and Ishvara, never between self and another object out there. A friend of mine who he was in a relationship, right? And his partner was coming from the Tantra. I don't know what that is, like Tantra, you know, it's all about being close. And her often complaint was she could never feel close to him. She felt that he was always distanced away. And he was saying, you know, I cannot, it's like no matter what I do, she's just never satisfied. She just wants to be, she just feels like I'm not close enough. And on the basis of that one notion alone, they broke up because she could just never experience the closeness that she was looking for. What does Vedanta say? Impossible. No matter how close you want to be to your partner, there will always be another complaint. I want to be closer. So the only person you can be close to is Ishvara, yourself. Now, what is Ishvara? Everyone. So this is the irony. By knowing Ishvara, which is everyone, I now feel close to everyone. But what do? We do it the other way around. I want to be close to a particular object, but you're not close to yourself because there's no difference between yourself and Ishvara. So this means, firstly, the person has to discover their inner self, their unity with God, and since God is everything, now I can enjoy closeness with everyone.
Like if I understand Ishvara is everyone and I feel this connection to everyone, yeah. I still cannot feel the infinite with this other person?
See, when we say being one, knowing Ishvara as not myself being not different from Ishvara, and everything is Ishvara. So this means the relationship changes now. You're happy with yourself, right? So when you're happy with yourself, are you looking to be closer with someone else? No. In other words, we only look to be close to someone else on the basis of our own lack of fullness, because we think by being close to another, I will fill myself up. But by recognizing your fullness, then whether they're distant or close, it makes no difference to you.
It's a bit like using the other as the mirror, because you're happy with the results of what you're seeing in the mirror. If that person is appreciating you, you love them more because they're appreciating you. So it's a bit like a feedback loop in a mirror.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Okay, so knowing the attributes of Jnani, how is this now helpful? Because this is what we're talking about. First of all, a jnani also has to exhaust their prarabdha karma. This means they also have to go through a life. Now, what is prarabdha karma? It means it's a series of pleasant and unpleasant experiences. So now the question is, considering the jnani is advanced, an advanced being in terms of their sadhana and how much work they've done, the question is, what is their attitude towards these pleasant and unpleasant experiences? How does he or she handle them? How do they respond to this? And in verse 13, what do we say? The first characteristics of a wise person, in fact, we're just going to continue verse 13 because I stopped at halfway last session. Krishna says, Sarva Bhutanam Adveshta. In other words, there is a lack of hatred towards sentient and insentient beings. Question is, what is hate? Hate is when your core values, what are core values? That which you strongly believe in. That means you strongly hold dear to you. So when your core values are violated or seemingly threatened, that's when we experience what we call hate. And then on the basis of that emotion, we end up justifying it. We say, well, here's why I should feel this. And then therefore, we just only amplify this feeling of hate instead of analyzing it. So therefore, hate is on the basis of justifying and not analyzing. Because where is that emotion of hate? In the hater. But by not analyzing, where is this stemming from? Where is it coming from? Could it be from my own background? Could it be from some unprocessed past emotions? Because the person doesn't do that, they have no choice but to justify. So what is the solution to resolve the feelings of hatred? One of the first things that you can do is, suppose now there's some hate towards, or a strong sense of not having a good will for another person. The first thing that we can do is change our perspective towards them, right? Because hate usually just means I'm holding one single perspective and I refuse to look at it in a different light. The second thing you can do is you can send them a prayer. You can bless them. Like, let them change for the better. Let God bless their soul. Soul specifically means their antahkarana. Let Ishvara do the rest. All I have to do is just wish them well. Another thing you can do is you can use hate as a reminder to look at your own thought processes. It's like, okay, here it is. Hate, now it's time to, what's going on in this mind? What's going on in this mind which is producing this narrative causing the emotion of hate? And the fourth thing is you can acknowledge that there is unwillingness or stubbornness not to see this person from another angle. Because that's what hate really is. I choose to see them from a different standpoint. So this means it's the hater's own stubbornness. Now, what does this mean in reference to a wise person? The wise person may disagree strongly with another person. They may even condemn another person's behavior. They may even go to the danda route, take the stick, whack the stick. But underneath all of these methods, the wise person is still capable of including that person in their prayers, wishing them well. So there's no question of rejecting anyone psychologically. Like, I'm going to bless everyone except Lloyd and, maybe Yoika, So this is not what it's about. In other words, no matter how dislikeful the person is, it doesn't cause me to exclude them from my prayers. This is one of the characteristics of a jnani. And then Krishna says, Maitraha. Maitraha means a jnani is a friend to all. One wishes to contribute whoever is willing to receive. That means the jnani is there to contribute. To whom? To whoever is willing to accept the contribution, the help, the assistance. Therefore, for a jnani, for a wise person, helping becomes spontaneous, completely natural, like breathing. And it's motivated out of what? Out of one's own fullness. When you are full, you cannot help yourself but to give. It's just natural. When one's empty, what happens then? Then they end up being a taker from the world. And also because a jnani is not bound by raga dvesha. They're not bound or controlled by these, as Robert said, binding likes and dislikes. Therefore, he or she is more available to Ishvara intuition. I spoke about Ishvara intuition previously. Yes, Kritika?
I just had a question in relation to, we see in a lot of our epics that we had rishis obviously they were very learned people, and then in certain moments they used to give something which is called a shrap, which is sort of, I don't know how to explain the word shrap. It was sort of like a opposite of blessing.
Curse.
Yeah, a curse.
Yeah.
So these guys were very learned. They were rishis, they were jnanis, and so there is sort of like a conflict which I'm trying to understand, that how come they were, cursing people when they were learned.
Right. So yeah, I understand. So in Mahabharata, and like full of curses, I'm gonna curse you, and then the person's sort of now cursed and have to go through this. These are metaphors actually. These are not necessarily I'm going to curse and wish you and wish you that you die or something. And secondly is you don't really know if he or she is a jnani, because a jnani will not curse, will not wish ill will to another person. So usually these are sometimes expressions of dissatisfaction, or in most cases, like what was it, the Pandu got cursed, right? Remember that from the Mahabharata. This means it's a metaphor. This means Pandu deserved to get on the basis of his action. That means on the basis of his irresponsibility. That means mistaking the sage for a deer, not taking moments to look, not taking moments to kind of reflect what could it really be. On the basis of that ignorance, what happens? Ishvara's grand order as though curses. But it's not kind of like, I'm going to curse you because I don't like you. It's just Ishvara responding on the basis of person's own irresponsibility. And then we sort of add a nice story, kind of like, a sage who's acting who's been an instrument of Ishvara curses. And you will also notice in these stories, it's never like the sage just curses because he just doesn't like the person. It's always because whoever got cursed did something before that. And the result of that behavior, they got cursed.
But a lot of times these curses are not equivalent to the kind of behavior that was, sort of demonstrated. Like even in case of King Dashrath,
right,
he was supposed to be this archer who could, just by hearing the sound, and he could shoot an arrow from really far off and still hit on target. And he killed Shravan Kumar, and those were not the sages who cursed Dashrath, but the curse that he got was not equivalent to the action that he did, at least apparently.
Right.
It was something which was done unknowingly. He didn't recognize that it's a human being who's sort of
right.
Nice. And he just shot the arrow and killed Shravan Kumar, and he got cursed for that.
Yeah, again, it is, it's still neglect, as we spoke about earlier. So, it's not like, oh, I didn't know and now I'm going to get away with it. It's not like, well, I wasn't looking properly and I killed someone. And now because you were not looking, Andre, you're going to get away with it. We're going to kind of like let you go. No, that is still a neglect. It's still an irresponsibility. Even if I wasn't looking, or if I didn't know, that was still my duty to be alert, be mindful to the situation. So this means Ishvara's order doesn't give exceptions to people's neglects, even if they do not have the full information. Because the fact is, you still have the opportunity to take the moment and to take that information in before acting.
And I wonder
Martin and then Pavan.
No, I was just going to say, I wonder if that feeds it. Those stories feed into the understanding of karmic consequences or cause and effect, so that it's not always apparent. There's sometimes a more subtle level of the karmic consequence.
Pavan?
For me, the moral of the story was that one should not be overconfident about their abilities, because in that case, he was too overconfident about his own abilities that he can shoot without looking. In fact, there is very high probability that he might be wrong. So one should not be arrogant about their abilities. That's his arrogance ended with that tragedy.
Right. Yeah. So it's a mixture of a little bit of neglect, a little bit of overconfidence, a little bit of pride, a little bit of not paying full attention to the environment, you know, a little bit of mechanical behavior, just going along with it because it sounds similar to something before. And then no matter what the reasons are, still Ishvara does not create exceptions for these little neglects that we produce in life. We still have to fully be accountable to them, because the law is cause and effect. There's no effect without a cause, and there's no cause without an effect. So everything counts. And one way to look at these curses is, no matter how small it is, it's still going to come back in a form of a quote curse. But it's not really a curse, it's just an effect.
So one related question, is there any end game for this grand order? I couldn't understand. Is it simply test cause and effect, or is there any end game for it?
No, there's no end game, because end game would imply there's now a creator with his own, you know, sort of like, you know, his own will, and he's like, okay, let's test who's going to pay attention, and okay, she's not paying attention and he's not paying attention, so let me kind of, you know, put him test and see if they can pass the test. So this means now there's an intelligent creator. We're now superimposing a human being onto the creator, and then we're kind of, you know, making the creator like a human being. So no, there is no test. It's just an impersonal order. Impersonal order in which there is an interaction between cause and effect between two objects. And it's an intelligent order. This means it's not just some random, you know, order. That means if I drop this object, it's gonna go down. It's not gonna go over there or over there. This means it is predictable. It is completely logical and intelligent and predictable. How I make use of that order is the kind of effects that I receive, right? So we have, you know, a nice building, and then we can, you know, walk off the building, and we're gonna go up or down, down. Now, does that mean now that God, you know, is sitting somewhere going, well, let me test them. Let me put on the edge of their building and see how firm he or she is in their sensibility? No, this means it was entirely my free will that concluded, well, I should fall down. I get cursed with a broken leg, right? One of the attributes of a Jnani is a friend. So the question is, what is a friend? A friend is one who guides. That means one who guides or directs you. If you're knowingly or unknowingly going on the wrong track, a friend is the one who's going to pick that up and assertively say, hey, here's some correction that you can make. The second is, a friend is the one with whom you can share secrets, and without feeling fear that they're going to expose that information. This means, you know, it's going to be confidential. A friend is one who, when things go sour and they see that you're sort of, you know, in some trouble, they don't suddenly fade in the background, worried that you're going to ask for a loan someday. In other words, a friend is there in need, because what often happens is like, they're not doing very well. So this means if they keep on going down that path, and since I'm their friend, they're going to come to me and they're going to ask for a loan. A Jnani is not going to think like this, or a friend is not going to think like this. Why? Because what was the first attribute of a friend? The one who takes you, corrects the course of action. If the person is going off track, if a friend sees, well, you're kind of, you know, going on this path, and according to my clarity, you're not doing very well. So this means I want you to make a few corrections. Here's a few suggestions that you can apply. So this means a friend's there to correct the course of another. And the fourth attribute of a friend is they have a sensitive mind in reference to your turmoils. This means they want to find solutions for you. They want to generally involve themselves to help you out. This is the four attributes of a friend. Then Krishna says, nirmamaha. This is being, that means the Jnani is free from the need to claim external objects as mine. This object, this pen belongs to me. This laptop belongs to me. A Jnani is free from the need to claim or to keep claiming objects as mine. Now, why is this? What is the understanding that would make this so? I'll give you a few logical statements. So whenever you say mine, it's always in reference to having a body in the first place. And since a Jnani is free of the body, it means what? I don't possess anything. Tell me, do you have a notion of mine inside your dreams? Do you ever notice that? Your dream can have even people that you know, your wife, your husband, your dog, but do you ever say, oh, that's my dog? No. In the dream, you just see the object that you know, you only see it objectively. You just see it as it is. There's no person, there's no principle of claiming it as mine. Why? Because mine is only in reference to having a physical body. The moment you add a physical body, then whatever is associated to the physical body, we claim as mine. But since the Jnani's understanding is I am not this physical body, I am much more than this physical body, then I don't really actually own anything. Even at birth, the jiva, the person that's born, has little concept of this physical body. And through the course of time, they get learned. It's like a learned behavior. This is your body, my body hurts, right? And then I have a headache. And so every time we say these statements, we associate the head to I, the stomach ache to I. And so all of these pains we associate to I. And then eventually we say, this body is mine. So even the body is not yours. The second logic is the world of objects, right? Whenever you claim something is mine, what is that? It's just consisting of objects. So this world of objects, which the person claims as mine, was present even before you were born. Thus, to claim anything as mine implies what? That you are the creator, that you are the sustainer of that which is being claimed. But that's not true, because that was there even before you were born. The third logic is, if you got amnesia right now, then whatever you claimed as mine, you would suddenly forget about it. In other words, the principle of mind entirely depends on what? A functional brain, a functional memory. The moment you forget, whatever I claimed as mine is no longer mine. Often you'll hear in these documentaries, right? Someone got amnesia, they hit their head or lightning strikes, and suddenly, they can't even recognize their brother or sister. It's like, who are you? But just a moment ago, you were mine. And the fourth is, it's a contradiction. If you say something is mine, then it can't be me. It's mine. Because to say something is mine, does that not imply it is part of me? It can't be you. Because to claim something as mine implies the existence of a subject that was there prior to that object. In other words, I was present even when that object wasn't considered mine, but now I'm claiming it as mine. Next is nirahankaraha. This means a jnani is free from putting the I in the body-mind complex. Therefore, the jnani is free from sense of doer. Who is the doer? What is the doer? For simplicity, the body-mind is the doer. Yes, we can now go deeper and say the body-mind is not the doer because it's actually the laws and orders, it's not the laws and orders, etc. For simplicity, it's the body-mind is the doer. Now, whoever is the doer, what does this mean? There is karma, because the doer is the one who does the karma. When there is karma, does that not imply there is a punya and papa, there is a consequence coming back to that doer? Yes. So this means if this body, for example, strikes the hammer, are you now responsible for that, or am I responsible for that? From the standpoint of this body, I'm responsible. Why? Because this body did the action. So this means this body is the doer. The jnani's I is no longer in the body-mind. The jnani is free of the punya papa. Because where does all punya papa belong to? Onto the body, because the body is the doer. But since I am not the body, therefore I am free of whatever punya papa from the past and that will continue in the future will be. Therefore, for a jnani, there is no birth. Because what does birth mean? I no longer mistake myself as the body. And what do we just say about the body? The body is that onto which the enjoyment or suffering of the consequences are done onto. Because the body did the action. Therefore, the body has to be sustained in order to receive the enjoyment or the suffering from its past actions. But since I'm not the body, therefore, where is the question of me now coming back as another body to continue enjoying the consequences? Yeah.
What about Sukshma Sharira, Andre?
Yeah, Sukshma Sharira from the, will continue obviously, but Sukshma Sharira has to continue while the person is alive, right? So the jnani will have to exhaust their prarabdha karma. This means that we'll keep on going to the punya and papa karma. It has to keep exhausting. So for example, if I release an arrow, right, in a state of ignorance, an arrow is traveling towards a deer, and I go and get self-knowledge, and the deer hits, and the arrow hits the deer, and now the police comes after me in a state of knowledge, Am I now free? Am I now relieved from the punishment of from that action? No. This means a jnani will still go to jail for the past actions in a state of ignorance. So this means the jnani will still have to live out the prarabdha karma from the stage of ignorance. That sukshma sharira that was there in the stage of ignorance is also there in the stage of knowledge. However, that sukshma sharira simply doesn't come back anymore. Because in order to have a body, you need a what? You need a subtle body. That means a sukshma sharira. But since I'm other than a sukshma sharira, then what's the point of receiving another one? In other words, as long as I believe I am this sukshma sharira, that just means the subtle body of the mind, I will get another mind. It's simple as that. Pavan, does that answer?
Yeah, that was a very good example. Yeah. Fire an arrow and then gain knowledge. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
The next question is, why are you not the mind? What is the jnani's understanding? Why am I not the mind? Think about it this way. If the mind was mind, okay, what is the mind? It's just a series of thoughts. Then you would be the master of it. But who is the master of their mind? In fact, who would opt in, right? Just think about it. Who would opt in for a mind that is turbulent, that is slow, that is blunt, that makes mistakes? Who would opt in for this kind of mind? No one. And yet we can all relate to this kind of mind. In other words, we didn't choose the mind that we've gotten. We simply received it on the basis of, as I just explained, on the basis of punya papa karma from the past life. Okay, next is samma dukkha sukha. This means a wise person is equal in pleasant and unpleasant situations. This means they have cultivated a mental shock absorber. So the question is, what contributes a mental shock absorber? What kind of things will we have to have this shock absorber that's able to sort of soften these blows of life? First of all, you would have to understand that life undergoes sixfold modifications. Because if we don't understand that that the world is going through these sixfold modifications of growth and birth and growth and maturity and decay, disease, then there will be a lot kind of a stubborn relationship with the world. But the moment you know that everything goes through birth, through maturity, through decay, through disease, through death, then you have a different relationship with it. Because now you're like, well, I don't have to be so rigid about the way things are because they're just going through these sixfold modifications. The second understanding is, if you think about it, it is unrealistic to expect the world or things to match your expectations. That's another shock absorber, because 4 scenarios could happen in any situation. First of all, turn out exactly as you want it. It could turn out opposite. You could get more of it or less of it. That is the truth in any situation. Now, where is the question of just expecting number 1 or number 3? That is, I want exactly as I want it or I want more of it. That is unrealistic. Therefore, we have to be ready for any of these 4 scenarios. I can get exactly what I want. I can get opposite, more of it, or less of it. So that's another mental shock absorber. So if you get less of it, you're like, well, I just got 1/4 of the possibilities. The other shock absorber is being flexible in life, just flexible to adapt in situations. This is the mark of a good student. Just being flexible in whatever happens and then finding ways to adjust instead of kind of sticking to these old rigid patterns and saying, no, this is how things should be. No, this is what the environment is presenting me now. So let me find a way to adapt to it. For example, COVID, what happened there? Some businesses ended up going bankrupt. Why? Because they refused to adapt to the new situation. And some businesses flourished. Why? Because they found a way. Where is the world going? Towards webinars and digital, and everyone's working from home. Therefore, they simply built onto that and they flourished. So this means flexibility is the key to sustainability of our growth. And the last one is taking the results of our actions as prasada. That means every result of the action is a blessing from the grand order, from which you can learn from. Whatever happens, you do something, there's 2 ways to look at it. Well, this didn't turn out the way I wanted. I'm a failure. Or you can say, okay, wonderful. I have received the result. This is a blessing. And I can now learn from this in order to adjust, to refine, so that I can change my approach. What is equanimity in reference to a jnani? What does it mean for a jnani to have, a wise person to have an equanimous mind? There's a nice metaphor. It comes from the Chinmaya school. Imagine there's a father, right? And a father is now, walks into the room and he wants to play a prank on the son. So the father's wearing a scary mask and walks into the room, and the son screams in fear by the sight of this stranger. And then what does the father do? He removes the mask. And then the son finds it amusing. Oh, wow, it's my father. And then the son says, oh, Dad, please put the mask back on, because now it's amusing. Now I know that I know the real face behind this mask. So now you can put this mask back on. So what does this mean? In that same way, once the world is known to be not what I thought it was, but Ishvara alone, then that very same world, which used to give us fear, which used to give us a relationship of anxiety, now transforms and becomes something to be enjoyed, something that you can look at objectively. Therefore, the world doesn't change for a jnani. What changes? The relationship towards the world. Because now you know what is the essence of this world, which I was finding intriguing, which I was finding sort of, let me get into it, let me explore, and it's there's fears there and there's pleasures there, and I have to attend to everything, I have to learn everything, I have to be the master of everything. Now you just understand what is the one content of the world, Ishvara alone. Once the person knows that, their relationship immediately changes with the world. Therefore, there is less chance to experience these highs or lows. That is the case for a jnani, knowing the nature of the world. Okay, next one is kshami. A jnani is one who is accommodative. When an unpleasant situation arises, there is a tendency to change it. Why? So that is favorable to you and I. That is a natural reaction. Unpleasant, let's change it. And this willingness to change it happens in only two ways. Preyaha, this means I'm not accounting the whole. I want to change it for myself, for my sake. This means it is impulsive, immediate, manipulative, because I want to change it for my sake. This means I do not include the other. This is preyaha. The second is shreyaha. This means the person accounts the whole. Therefore, they become reflective. They include the other's well-being for the sake of making sure that everyone's happy, that both parties are happy. So the question now is, which way comes more natural? Preyaha or shreyaha? Okay, I would assume, we'll just say preyaha. So this means the immediate mechanical way is one that's going to come first. So now what is kshami? Kshami is postponing this impulse. Like literally pausing, not falling for this preyaha way. Why not? Because first of all, the person understands, I haven't considered the unknown factors. I do not know everything about the situation. Therefore, where is the need of acting impulsively? The other may retaliate. So why be impulsive? Why manipulate? And preyaha also has unpleasant repercussions in the future, which the person would then have to deal with. Right? So these three reasons is why one would stay away from preyaha and therefore postpone preyaha and think about shreyaha. Think about the pleasant, the reflective way in which both parties will benefit. Kshami also means forbearance. Forbearance means not giving into the need to complain in uncomfortable circumstances. Just not giving to that natural need, like, oh, this is not working out, let me complain. Body sore, back pain, and now the whole life becomes about back pain, right? All of your time gets into back pain. But rather, it is getting into a problem-solving mode. So instead of, when something unpleasant happens, right, instead of complaining about it, because you cannot do anything about it anyway, if you complain, what does the person do? What can I do to problem solve? Let's get into problem-solving mode. Now, what is the most uncomfortable circumstance which can happen to you? The most uncomfortable? Death. That is what everyone universally finds the most uncomfortable, the thought of death. So now, what does this mean? It means we need to come in terms with this inevitable death. Because as long as the one person is ignoring or postponing this idea, this inevitable fact of death, then what's going to happen? It's going to come as little fears, as postponing life. And one of the ways that we can get comfortable with death is you can read about NDEs, that means near-death experiences. You can understand that your body has died many times already. Your body undergoes, or you undergo mini death each night when you sleep. One moment you're there, next moment you're not. Of course, that is a lot different than sleep, but still, it's a metaphor, sleep. And you can also appreciate that nothing can go out of existence. This means there's no real death. There's only death of the body, and on the basis of not having ascertained the knowledge, then the new body will come. If the person has ascertained the knowledge, then there's no body, there's no mind that comes back. Simply remain as Brahman and Ishvara. So this means one of the things that I used to do a couple of years ago was there's a men's retreat. And the men's retreat was like 10 days. And one of the things that involved was we were like role-playing death. So we were putting ourselves on like a ledge or something. And our partner was taking an axe. And, he was, going to slam the axe on our neck. And then when he does that, he's going to, stamp on the ground, to make this loud noise so we can, make sure that he has struck the axe. And then what we're supposed to do is just pretend like we're dead. So it's like, last thoughts. And the instructor said, what are your last thoughts right now when you're on the verge of having your head cut off? Right? And I'm like, God. And then my partner goes, bang. And then I just, and then just pretend like total stillness. And we did that for about 1 whole hour, 1 or 2 hours. And we all just felt so much more empowered because it's such a powerful exercise, right? When someone, you just role play death. So these are the little things that we can do that changes our relationship to dying. Kshami is also interpreted as forgiveness. Forgiveness is letting go the need to hold on to things which you perceive as hurtful. Sometimes, someone hurts us, so they say something that is unwise or inconsiderate, and then we hold on to this feeling and unwilling to let it go. And what is forgiveness? Letting go of that feeling. How do you forgive? Firstly, understand that everyone is born ignorant. So any foolishness that comes from anyone is owing to this universal fact. There's not a single person that comes educated or how to conduct themselves and be respectful. Everyone is born ignorant. So everyone makes mistakes. On the basis of that, you can forgive. And from the standpoint of a Jnani, we'll ask, why is forbearance natural? Because what is forbearance? Not giving into the need to complain in uncomfortable situations, but getting into a problem-solving mode. In other words, putting up with the discomforts that life throws at us. That's forbearance. So the question is, why is forbearance natural for a Jnani? Because Atma, the nature of I, has been assimilated fully. And what is Atma? Fullness. And therefore, what is the one common thread in all experience? That fullness. So even if an uncomfortable situation arises, I am always full. Yes, there is a situation that is unpleasant that has to be dealt with, but underneath all of that, there is a sense of fullness. And therefore, that produces a natural state of forbearance for a Jnani. Santushtah satataim yogi yatatma dridhanishchayaha mayarpita mano buddhihi yo madbhaktak same priyaha.
One who is completely satisfied, who is always united, who has mastery over his mind, whose ascertainment is firm, whose mind and intellect are resolved in me, who is my devotee, is beloved to me.
So santushtaha. So Jnani is completely satisfied. How is a wise person satisfied with one's own body-mind? Let's ask that. They're carrying this body-mind around. What is their relationship to this body-mind? The understanding is the body-mind is an instrument gifted by Ishvara. And it is sculpted according to your sanchita karma. Sanchita karma means according to the actions that you have performed in the last life. So this means that any seeming imperfection that we are given is beyond our control. Like, what can you do about the mind and the body that you're given? Nothing. All you can really do is contribute within your own sphere of influence using what you've been given. That's it. There's no point complaining. There's no point saying, oh, I wish I was more, I wish I was, better family or smarter. It's just no point. Use what you've got and then participate in your sphere of influence. It's simple as that. So even though there is seeming imperfections, there's also an inner knowing, and that is, my truth is infinite. My truth is eternal. Therefore, nothing can really take away, not even this seemingly imperfect or limited body, nothing can take away from one's fullness. Nothing can add more and nothing can take away. Because the Jnanis, where is their I? In Atma, in Brahman. How are they satisfied in reference with the world? What do they understand? Everything in this world is undergoing maturity, undergoing evolution, according to Ishvara's law of dharma and karma. So you don't have to now worry about the world. Everything is going through its own time and its own evolution. All you can do is contribute where you can. So it always comes back to being an active participant within your own sphere of influence. And it's also not that the Jnani doesn't see any problems with the world, because often we, pick up these statements in the spiritual world like, oh, everything's perfect to them and, there's no such thing as imperfection. No, because that is still a Vyavaharika world. If I see two people fighting, I'm not going to say as a Jnani, oh, that's, it's so perfect. It's all Ishvara's order is supposed to. No, a Jnani is going to do something if possible. If not, then, let someone else let the police handle the problem. So this means the Jnani's focus is on contribution. A wise person is a yogi. This means he or she is ever united in me. Why? Because a Jivanmukta's identity is not different to Ishvara's. And what is that identity? Brahman. Just like the identity between the little wave and the huge vast ocean is the same water, the H2O. Now the question is, what got a Jnani to this point of evolution? Why do they understand? What got them to understand that our nature is one? The 5 sadhanas, which is what we talked about, verse 1 to 12. And also the person in the stage of, a mumukshu has undergone viveka, which has produced vairagya. That means they've exercised their discrimination, and that discrimination has now produced dispassion. This means dispassion on the basis of things are coming and going. So I don't have to get too involved in it. I can work with them objectively. And this dispassion then further refines the viveka. And this viveka gets so refined that you're now able to start picking out amongst this huge spiritual marketplace and picking out who can help me and who cannot help me. This is how we often start, right? We do not know what we want or we don't want. So the more our viveka gets exercised, the more we're able to fine tune and find a teacher and then find the pramana, the Vedantic teaching. Okay, then yat atma. This is mastery over the processes of the mind. Why does a wise person have mastery of the mind? We talked about the 5 sadhanas. All those 5 sadhanas involve using the mind as one's own psychologist. So instead of complaining, going, oh, why am I not thinking straight, or what are things not working out? Look at your own thought processes and look at them as though you're your own psychologist and analyze them. What's the cause of this? Where could it be coming from? Right? What could be causing it? What are the triggers? So you're simply working with your own little circuitry that's going on in the mind. So this means a mumukshu, a sadhaka who is committed, simply looks at their mind and then sees what they can do and where those parts that they need help with. So this means they take the right course of action, problem-solving mode. Krishna says, Dridha nishchayaha. So this means the Jivanmukta has knowledge of I, this means I am, is free from doubts. meaning it's solidly ascertained, this knowledge. It is firmly established. And what's the cause of this? What's the result of this firm, established self-knowledge? Both the action and the desire, there's a different relationship to it. Because how do we usually exercise our desires and actions? What do? I'm going to exercise this in the name of my sake, in the name of what I prefer. Whereas a Jnani exercises it in the name of Dharma. Why? Because Dharma is Ishvara. And is Jnani separate from Ishvara? No. Therefore, Jnani is helplessly subserving all of their actions in the name of Ishvara. Whereas how does one who doesn't have Jnana, what do? They also do dharmic actions, but for who is it for? The person. You see the difference? So in a stage of ignorance, what is a person, why are they doing these positive things and being a good person and helping the world? For whose sake is it? For one's own sake. This means I want some reward. I want some benefit out of my dharma, out of my artha, and out of my karma. But even if you just do dharma, it is still for the sake of self-benefit. Whereas a jnani, they're also doing actions dharmically, but is it for their sake? No. Because they understand that dharma is nothing but Ishvara in the form of order. Therefore, they're helplessly engaged in dharma. And finally, it says, Mayi arpita mano buddhihi. This means the mind and intellect is resolved in me. Okay, what does this mean? Who can explain? What does it mean to have your mind resolved in Ishvara? I'll give you a clue. What is a pot made out of?
Clay.
Okay, so the mind is resolved in me.
So my thoughts are Ishvara.
Yeah, they're nothing but form of Ishvara. This means Jnani's buddhi understands that this very buddhi and manas, my very intellect and my very emotions, are Ishvara's intelligent and material cause. This means wherever there is mithya, that's exactly where satyam is. They're never apart. Wherever there is thought, that's where truth is. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.